Hey, folks. It is Nathaniel Stinnett with the Environmental Voter Project. And today we've got a mini briefing on what we're seeing in North Carolina, a really, really tight, important, competitive state. For those of you who don't know the Environmental Voter Project, we're a national nonprofit that is laser focused on finding people who care deeply about climate yet aren't voting and then turning them into better voters. We run hundreds of messaging experiments each year. We work with thousands of volunteers, and we get great results. But also, as part of our work, we've got lots of research that we want to share with you, our volunteers, our donors, and the general public, so that you can be as well informed as possible. So today, we're going to do a very, very quick briefing on this North Carolina information. All right, first off, the big headline is we at the Environmental Voter Project have identified over 266,000 low propensity environmental voters in North Carolina. These are all people who are already registered to vote. They're highly likely to list climate or the environment as their #1 priority, yet we think they're unlikely to cast a ballot on November 5th unless mobilized to do so by a sophisticated, robust campaign like ours. Why do we think they're unlikely to vote on their own? Because we've looked at their public voting histories. And when you look at these people's public voting records, they did not vote in the 2020 presidential election or any election since then. That's your profile. We think you need a nudge to get to the polls. All right, 266,000. What does a number like that mean in North Carolina? Well, you can see in the 2020 presidential election, Donald Trump only won North Carolina by 74,000 votes, a number that is less than a third of this 266,000 number. So this population of low propensity environmental voters has a lot of potential political power, but it's only potential unless we mobilize them. All right, we've got some competitive elections in North Carolina. First, the presidential election is going to be very, very important and could be decided by North Carolina. It's usually listed as the second most likely tipping point state for the presidential election. The gubernatorial race in North Carolina used to be competitive, but it no longer is. We don't have the time to go into that sordid story, but I'm sure many of you are aware of it. However, other statewide races are still competitive, in particular the Attorney General's race. Due to pretty aggressive gerrymandering, most U.S. House races in North Carolina are not competitive, but the 1st congressional district is a true toss-up race. And there aren't that many toss-ups this year, so that could be a really big difference maker. And then finally, although the political makeup of the state Senate and state House in North Carolina is not close, it is very close to having veto-proof majorities. Republicans have first didn't have veto-proof majorities, then did in North Carolina, and so it's going to be very, very close. And so a whole bunch of state legislative races could have a big, big impact this fall. All right, early voting is from October 17th to November 2nd. So this is a mediocre early voting window. It's larger than many states, but smaller than some of the best states. But enough time to really, really get a bunch of people to vote early. All right. What do these 266,000 low propensity environmental voters look like in North Carolina? Well, first, I want you to look at this bottom row here, reg voters. That's a demographic overview of all registered voters in North Carolina. So for instance, 10.8% of registered voters in North Carolina are age 18 to 24. 68.5% of registered voters in North Carolina are white. That's how you read that bottom line. That is just a baseline, though. What I really want you to pay attention is the row right above it that says LPEVs. That's low propensity environmental voters. That's these 266,000 first-time or largely first-time climate voters who we're going to be targeting and hopefully mobilizing to vote in North Carolina. First thing you'll notice is, oh my gosh, is this a disproportionately young group of voters? You'll see, what, 89.2% of them? Something like that, 89%? are under the age of 35. Now, don't get me wrong, in all of our states, these low propensity environmental voters are disproportionately young, but we usually don't see something that dramatic. Almost 9 out of 10 of these low propensity environmental voters are under the age of 35. So the first thing to realize is this is a really, really, really young population of voters. You'll also see there are almost no 50 to 64-year-olds who fit this criteria in North Carolina. Again, that's usually the least represented age group in our target population, but it's usually not as dramatic as this. Second thing, you'll see that there is a slight age gap a slight gender gap in this group. There's a gender gap in the overall electorate in North Carolina, where there are about 7 percentage points more women than men among registered voters. But in our target population, it expands all the way to 11 percentage points. So women are slightly more disproportionately represented in our target population. How's that for a mouthful? All right. Final racial breakdown, a final demographic breakdown I want to point you to is the racial breakdowns. You'll see North Carolina is a very white state. 2/3 of registered voters are white in North Carolina. However, barely 1/3 of our targets are white. Only 38% of these low propensity environmental voters are white. So our targets are disproportionately made up of people of color. Again, that's the case in all of our states, but rarely as dramatic as what we're seeing here in North Carolina. 43% of our targets in North Carolina are Black. Slightly over 9% are Hispanic. That's twice as prevalent as what is in the underlying baseline of registered voters in North Carolina. Our target population is also disproportionately Asian American and Pacific Islander. Finally, one thing that is just interesting to note here. In all of our states, especially the states that have large populations of Native Americans, our target populations are disproportionately made up of Native Americans. Probably more than any other racial group, but not in North Carolina. It's the only state where we don't see that. And for those of you who know North Carolina politics very well, that's because of the Lumbee tribe. The Lumbee tribe of North Carolina is very culturally conservative. They, unlike many other Native American tribes, tend to not prioritize climate and environmental issues. They're largely down here in Robeson County, sort of near Myrtle Beach and on the border with South Carolina. So just an interesting thing to point out. All right. As I mentioned, the presidential election is extraordinarily close in North Carolina. As of October 9th, in an average of polls that we got from 538.com, Donald Trump is trending ahead of Kamala Harris by less than 1 percentage point. Extraordinarily close. As you also likely know, because of Hurricane Helene, there has been extraordinary death and loss and destruction in a lot of Western North Carolina. As of October 9th, the State Board of Elections has already begun making it easier for people in these red counties to vote. They have allowed counties to hire more poll workers. They've broadened ability to drop off ballots in different counties and expanded early voting and things like that. The state legislature might also make it easier for people in these counties or perhaps other counties to vote because of the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. And that's something that's important to keep in mind, because elections are logistically complicated things. And when you throw in a truly devastating disaster like this hurricane, it can make it really, really hard for certain people to vote. And so we're going to be paying attention to that. All right, we've got some budget gaps to fill. As of today, October 9th, We need to raise another $85,000 to meet our baseline budget and finish paying for the digital ads that we want to run to mobilize these voters. That's on top of all of the direct mail and phone calls that we've been doing into North Carolina. We have also, though, looking at previous experiments, figured out that we can spend beyond that baseline budget without having a diminishing return on investment. In other words, we can spend beyond an extra 85,000 and still keep on creating just as many new votes with each dollar we spend until we spend an additional 315,000. That would allow us to get even more direct mail in the field. We've got to do it quickly, and also additional digital ad volume and content. And then finally, I just want to point out, we do expect late-breaking changes to voting logistics in North Carolina, especially in these counties that were impacted by Hurricane Helene. And when that information is out, we want to immediately be able to communicate with our targeted voters, those 266,000 low propensity environmental voters. And to do that, we are going to want to have paid phone banks. We almost never use paid phone banks. We've got amazing volunteer phone bankers, but when we need to reach a whole bunch of people immediately in like one day, we do need to pay people to do that. And we think it's very, very important in this particular instance to do that. So this is what we are trying to raise money for. We also have phone banks into North Carolina from here through Election Day. So if you are interested in being part of our work, you can go to that QR code, you can go to environmentalvoter.org, and you can do one or all of the following three things. One, donate to support our work. As I mentioned here, we've got important budget gaps to fill. We can make an enormous difference in an extraordinarily important state. Two, sign up to volunteer for a phone bank. It is so easy. We train you, we give you a proven script, and boy, will you feel good making a difference. And then finally, if you want to get notified of other mini briefings like this that we put out, click subscribe on our YouTube channel so that you can get notified of those further briefings. Thank you so much for being part of our work at the Environmental Voter Project. Take care.